I'm Patricia Sullivan, 58 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting here telling you this story. Just 6 months ago, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. My son Robert, my firstborn, had been meticulously planning to destroy everything my husband and I had built. The evidence on his computer was undeniable. Detailed plans that made me physically ill. How could my own flesh and blood harbor such hatred? What happens when the child you raised becomes the monster under your bed? Before we dive into this nightmare, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community of survivors and truth seekers. This story might be the most painful one I've ever shared, but sometimes the darkest tales have the most important lessons. For 35 years, Thomas and I had what most people would consider a picture-perfect marriage. We met during our senior year at Boston University, married 2 years later, and built our life in Newton, Massachusetts, an affluent suburb with tree-lined streets and excellent schools. Thomas, now 60, built a successful financial consulting firm from the ground up while I pursued my passion for education, eventually becoming the principal of one of the most prestigious private schools in the area. Our home was the envy of our friends. A beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch and meticulously maintained gardens. We hosted summer barbecues, Thanksgiving dinners, and Christmas parties that people talked about for months. From the outside, the Sullivans had it all. Robert came along 3 years into our marriage. From the beginning, he was intense and driven. As a child, he excelled at everything he touched: academics, baseball, debate club. By the time he graduated from Dartmouth with honors, he had multiple job offers from prestigious investment firms. At 32, he was now a senior investment banker at a top firm in Boston, with a corner office and a sleek apartment downtown. Our daughter Sarah arrived 4 years after Robert. More laid back than her brother, she pursued art and literature, eventually becoming a graphic designer for an advertising agency in New York. At 28, she had a serious boyfriend and seemed content with her life, though she visited less frequently than we would have liked. We weren't perfect. No family is. But I believed we had weathered the usual storms of family life relatively unscathed. Thomas could be distant when work consumed him, and I probably focused too much on my career during certain periods. But we loved our children fiercely and did everything we could to provide them with opportunities and support. The first signs that something was off with Robert began about 8 months ago. His visits home became more frequent but shorter. He seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. When Thomas asked about his work or personal life, Robert would give vague answers before changing the subject. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked during one such visit, as he stared out the kitchen window, his coffee untouched. "Fine, Mom. Just tired," he replied without turning around. There was a family dinner in March that sticks in my memory as the moment I first felt real unease. Thomas had grilled steaks, and I'd prepared all of Robert's favorites: roasted potatoes with rosemary, Caesar salad with my homemade dressing, and chocolate mousse for dessert. Sarah had driven up from New York for the weekend. Throughout dinner, Robert barely touched his food, instead nursing 3 glasses of Cabernet while asking unusually pointed questions about Thomas' business. "So the Peterson account must be worth, what, 7 figures annually to the firm?" Robert asked, swirling his wine. Thomas looked surprised. "We don't usually discuss client specifics, but yes, it's substantial." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious how the old man keeps the lights on," Robert replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Later, as I was clearing plates, I overheard Robert on his phone in the hallway, speaking in a hushed, intense tone. "It's all coming together. Soon I'll be getting what's mine. They have no idea." When he saw me standing there, he quickly ended the call and flashed that hollow smile again. "Just work stuff, Mom. These deals can get complicated." I nodded and smiled back, pushing down my concerns. Robert had always been ambitious, competitive. Surely he was just referring to some promotion or bonus. Why would I assume anything sinister from my own son? The following weekend, Robert unexpectedly stopped by again, claiming he'd left some important documents in the guest room during his last stay. While he was showering before dinner, I noticed a folder peeking out from his messenger bag in the hallway. I'm not proud that I looked. Mothers should respect their adult children's privacy. But something in my gut told me, I needed to see what was inside. The folder contained printouts of Thomas' business financial statements. Information Robert shouldn't have had access to. A yellow sticky note was attached to one page with the cryptic message: possible entry point. T never reconciles these accounts personally. I quickly returned everything exactly as ID found it, my hands trembling. That night, I barely slept, telling myself there must be an innocent explanation. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next morning, Robert mentioned he needed to run some errands before heading back to the city. When I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I hesitated only briefly before heading to the guest room. His laptop sat on the desk, closed but not powered down. Robert had always been overconfident. I opened it, half expecting to be stopped by a password, but the screen lit up immediately, displaying dozens of open browser tabs and documents. What I found turned my world upside down. There were detailed notes on Thomas' business accounts, including password hints and security question answers. A document titled Sullivan Takedown Timeline outlined a methodical plan to frame Thomas for financial fraud by creating a paper trail of fabricated transactions. Robert had already begun siphoning small amounts from company accounts and disguising them as legitimate business expenses. Another folder contained emails with someone named Derek, a private investigator who Robert had hired to dig up dirt on me. Need anything that could compromise her standing in the education community, Robert had written. School board meeting minutes, disciplinary actions, student complaints, especially anything that wasn't made public. But most disturbing were journal-like entries where Robert detailed his resentments. Always Sarah this, Sarah that. Mom never missed one of her stupid art shows, but couldn't be bothered to attend my debate championships when they conflicted with Sarah's activities. Dad pushed me to excel, then resented me when I did better than him. They gave me opportunities, then held them over my head like I should be eternally grateful for what any decent parent would provide. Page after page of grievances, some dating back to early childhood, perceived slights and injustices that had apparently festered for decades. According to these entries, Robert believed we had favored Sarah, that we had denied him emotional support while pushing him to achieve, that his accomplishments had gone uncelebrated while his sister's mediocre efforts were praised. I was still reading, tears streaming down my face, when I heard the front door open. I quickly closed the laptop and wiped my eyes, but not fast enough. "What the hell are you doing?" Robert stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I saw what you're planning, Robert. The embezzlement scheme, the investigator, everything. How could you do this to us? We're your parents." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Shame, perhaps, or hesitation, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You shouldn't have looked," he said coldly. "You never respected my privacy, did you? Always hovering, always checking up, but never actually seeing me. That's not true, and you know it. We've always loved you, supported me." He laughed. A harsh sound I'd never heard from him before. "You supported the idea of me, the achievement, the son you could brag about. Neither of you ever knew the real me, and you never cared to. Robert, please." I reached for him, but he stepped back. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever you think we did or didn't do, we can talk about it. We can get help." "I don't need help," he snapped. "For the first time, I'm seeing things clearly. You and Dad took everything from me. My childhood, my autonomy, my sense of self. It's time I took something back. By destroying our lives? How does that solve anything?" "It's justice," he said simply, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "And honestly, Mom, you haven't seen anything yet." He gathered his things with deliberate slowness, never taking his eyes off me, as if I were a dangerous animal that might attack. At the door, he paused. "I've always hated you and Dad," he said, each word like a physical blow. "I just got better at hiding it as I got older." After he left, I collapsed onto the guest bed, my mind racing. I needed to tell Thomas, to warn him about what was coming. But when he returned from his golf game and I tried to explain what I'd discovered, he shook his head in disbelief. "Patty, this is crazy talk," he said, using my nickname from our college days. "Robert is our son. Has not some criminal mastermind plotting against us. You probably misunderstood what you saw. I know what I saw, Thomas. He admitted it to my face. He was probably just angry you invaded his privacy. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. But it was already bigger than any of us realized. And Robert was just getting started. The first blow came 3 days later. I was pruning roses in the garden when my phone rang. Janet Levinson, the current chair of the school board at my former school. Patricia, she said, her voice unusually formal. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information. An anonymous source has provided documentation suggesting financial improprieties during your tenure as principal. My secateurs clattered to the ground. What? That's absurd, Janet. What kind of improprieties? Misappropriation of funds from the capital campaign for the new science wing. Specifically, allegations that approximately $118,000 was redirected through a series of complicated transactions. That's completely false, I said, my voice rising. Every dollar of that campaign was accounted for. You know me, Janet. I would never. I'm just telling you what's been alleged. She cut in. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate. We're conducting an internal audit, but I wanted to give you a heads up that the Boston Globe has also been contacted. A reporter called me this morning asking for comment. The world seemed to tilt around me. In my 22 years at the school, my integrity had never been questioned. I'd left 3 years ago with glowing testimonials and a retirement party attended by hundreds of colleagues, parents, and former students. By evening, my email inbox was filling with messages from former colleagues, some offering support, others asking pointed questions about the allegations. My phone buzzed constantly with text notifications. Someone had leaked the story to a local education blog, which had published a piece titled, "Beloved Former Principal Under Investigation, What We Know." Thomas was in New York for business, so I was alone when the doorbell rang at 8 p.m. A process server handed me a thick envelope. You've been served, Mrs. Sullivan. Inside was a lawsuit filed by Robert against Thomas, claiming his father had stolen investment strategies and client contacts from him to benefit his own firm. The complaint alleged that Thomas had accessed Robert's work computer during family visits and copied proprietary information worth no less than $4.2 million in potential earnings. I called Thomas immediately, but it went to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call back urgently, then sent a text. Robert is suing you. Please call. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I went outside to get the newspaper and stopped short at the sight of our front door and white siding. Sometime during the night, someone had spray-painted frauds in large red letters across the facade. As I stood there in my bathrobe, a neighbor walked by with her dog and quickly averted her eyes. Word was spreading. That afternoon, a frantic call came from my sister Deborah. Patty, have you seen what's online? Someone's posted your and Thomas' social security numbers, home address, and other personal information on several forums. There's even a Google Earth screenshot of your house with annotations about your security system. Before I could respond, another call beeped in. A former student I'd remained close with. Mrs. Sullivan. I got the strangest email that's supposedly from you. It says you're contacting former students to admit to altering grades for certain families in exchange for donations. I know you would never do that. But it looks like it came from your email address. By the time Thomas finally called back that evening, I was on the verge of collapse. I'd received dozens of similar calls from former students and colleagues. Our bank had frozen our accounts due to suspicious activity. The local news was running a story about the school board investigation. It's Robert, I said when Thomas called, my voice hoarse from crying. Hess doing all of this. Hess trying to destroy us. There was a long pause. I don't want to believe that, Thomas finally said, his voice strained. But the lawsuit, the allegations are so specific, so detailed. How would he know about those client meetings unless… Unless what, Thomas? Are you actually considering that these lies might be true? No, of course not, he said quickly. But I heard the hesitation. I'm coming home tonight. Well, figure this out. The only person who believed me unconditionally was my sister Deborah. When I called her sobbing after Thomas' call, she drove right over. I believe you, she said, wrapping her arms around me. Robert always had that darkness in him, even as a boy. Remember when he cut up Sarah's favorite doll because she got more attention at her birthday party? This is the same thing. Just on an adult scale. I clung to her like a lifeline, but her support couldn't stem the tide of what was coming. As the walls closed in around us, the deepest cut was yet to come. Thomas growing doubt in me. That night, he slept in the guest room, claiming he needed space to think. The distance between us, both physical and emotional, felt like the beginning of the end. Mom, I can't believe you're still denying everything. The evidence is right here. Sarah's voice, normally so warm, had turned to ice. We sat around our dining room table. Thomas, Sarah, Robert, and me, for what Robert had called a family meeting to clear the air. Id naively hoped this might be a chance to make Sarah understand what her brother was doing, but it quickly became clear she was already firmly in his camp. Robert had positioned himself at the head of the table, Thomas' usual spot, and methodically laid out what he called evidence of our failures as parents. Head created a PowerPoint presentation, complete with childhood photos annotated with dates and supposed incidents. Exhibit A, he said, clicking to a photo of 10-year-old Sarah at her art show, with Thomas and me proudly flanking her. Same day as my debate championship. Notice who's missing from my event. Robert, we've been over this, I said wearily. The art show was in the afternoon. Your debate ran into the evening. We attended both. But you left my event early, he countered. You prioritized her celebration dinner over my full competition. Before I could respond, he moved on to the next slide, a series of charts purporting to show the disparity in time and money spent on each child. According to his calculations, Sarah had received 58% more parental attention hours throughout childhood. The presentation continued with increasingly absurd metrics and accusations. When I tried to interject, Sarah cut me off. Let him finish, Mom. For once, just listen. The real bombshell came halfway through. Robert pulled out a manila envelope and slid it toward Thomas. What your wife never told you, he said, his voice suddenly gentle with feigned concern. I debated whether to share this, Dad. But you deserve to know. Thomas opened the envelope and pulled out what appeared to be hotel receipts and blurry photographs of me with a man. An affair with Richard Goldsmith, her vice principal, spanning nearly 2 years, Robert said solemnly. I discovered it while gathering evidence for my own case. The room spun around me. Richard had been a close colleague and friend, yes, but there had never been anything romantic between us. The receipts were from educational conferences we'd both attended, and the photos showed nothing more than professional interaction, though they'd been cropped to appear intimate. This is absurd, I said, my voice shaking. Thomas, you can't possibly believe this. Those conferences were school-sanctioned events with dozens of attendees. Then, explain why you had a separate room under your maiden name at the Chicago conference, Robert interjected smoothly before Thomas could respond. I never had a separate room. This is fabricated. All of it. Sarah stood up suddenly. I can't listen to more denials. Robert showed me the evidence weeks ago. Mom, the emails between you and Richard were pretty explicit. What emails? There were no emails. I looked desperately at Thomas, whose face had gone ashen. Sarah. Honey. Please. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't, she said coldly. I trusted you my whole life, defended you when Robert first told me his concerns. But the evidence is overwhelming, and now I learn you've been embezzling from the school. Cheating on Dad. I can't even look at you. I'm cutting ties, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Until you can be honest about what you've done, I don't want any contact. She grabbed her purse and walked out, Robert following after, shooting me a look of false pity. The front door slammed, leaving Thomas and me in devastating silence. Thomas, I whispered. None of it's true. You know me. 35 years together. Would I ever? I don't know what to think anymore, Patricia. He interrupted, using my full name. Always a bad sign. The school board investigation, the lawsuit, now this. It's all too specific to be completely fabricated. It's Robert Hess manipulating everything, creating false evidence. But why would he do that? What could he possibly gain from destroying his own family? I don't know yet. but I saw his plans on his computer. I told you what I found. Thomas rubbed his temples. Maybe you misinterpreted. Maybe it was research for some financial thriller he's writing. Maybe you're looking for any explanation except the truth, I said bitterly, that our son has become someone capable of this level of betrayal. That night, as I was searching for answers, I discovered something that chilled me even further. On our family's shared cloud storage, I found a folder of old family videos that had been modified. The timestamps showed recent editing activity. When I played them, I realized Robert had carefully edited the footage, removing moments where we showed him affection or pride, keeping only interactions that, taken out of context, could appear cold or dismissive. In one particularly heartbreaking edit, Head cut a video of his high school graduation to remove Thomas' tearful embrace, and my whispered, "I'm so proud of you, my brilliant boy," leaving only the moment when we turned to comfort a crying Sarah, making it appear Wed ignored his achievement entirely. These doctored videos had undoubtedly been shown to Sarah as proof of our supposed favoritism. The level of calculation was staggering. I tried calling Sarah repeatedly, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent emails explaining, pleading, but received only an automated response. "I am not accepting communications from this address at this time." By the end of the week, Thomas had moved into our lake house temporarily, claiming he needed space to sort through everything. My husband of 3.5 decades couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. I was alone in the home Wed built together, surrounded by family photos that now seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing on my porch. My hands trembled as I opened the door. "Mrs. Patricia Sullivan?" the female officer asked. "Yes, that's me. I'm Officer Reynolds. This is Officer Diaz. We're here about the threats made against Robert Sullivan. We'd like to ask you a few questions." "Threats?" "I haven't threatened anyone," I said, bewildered but not surprised. Of course this would be Robert's next move. They showed me printouts of emails supposedly sent from my account to Robert, containing explicit threats. "You'll regret what you've done. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of monster you are. And worse." "I never wrote these," I said firmly. "My son is framing me. He's been systematically trying to destroy my reputation and my marriage." Officer Diaz's expression softened slightly. "Mom, we understand family disputes can get heated, but these messages were traced to your IP address. Hes in finance and tech savvy. He could easily fake that." They asked more questions, took notes, and finally left with a warning to have no contact with Robert. As their car pulled away, a different vehicle pulled up. A man in a suit approached with another envelope. "You've been served," he said mechanically. Inside was a temporary restraining order. Robert claimed I had been stalking him, showing up at his workplace, and sending threatening messages. The order required me to stay at least 500 feet away from him and prohibited any form of contact. The final line was the cruelest cut. "Respondent is further ordered to vacate the residence at 47 Oakwood Drive within 24 hours, as petitioner requires access to personal belongings stored on the premises and fears for his safety." I was being forced out of my own home. I called Thomas, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried his assistant, who uncomfortably informed me that Thomas had instructed her to say he was unavailable. Desperate, I called our family attorney, who reluctantly told me that Thomas had retained separate counsel and he could no longer represent both of us. With nowhere else to go, I packed essentials into 2 suitcases. As I was loading them into my car, a neighbor known for 15 years, hurried her children inside rather than greet me. News travels fast in small communities, and the narrative Robert had created, embezzling school principal, unfaithful wife, threatening mother, had taken root. Deborah took me in without question, setting up her guest room with fresh linens and a vase of daffodils from her garden. "Stay as long as you need," she said, hugging me tightly. The next few weeks were a blur of horrible developments. The Boston Globe ran a story about the school board investigation with the headline, "Former Principal Faces Financial Misconduct Allegations." Thomas' business clients began jumping ship, concerned about their association with the firm amid rumors of fraudulent practices. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, unable to eat or sleep properly. The lowest moment came on a rainy Saturday at the local market. I'd ventured out, needing to feel normal for just an hour. In the produce section, I spotted Marion Cooper and Elizabeth Palmer, friends for over 20 years, with whom I'd served on numerous charity committees. When they saw me, Marion whispered something to Elizabeth, and they abruptly turned and walked in the opposite direction. That night, alone in Deborah's guest room, I found myself staring at her bottle of sleeping pills. It would be so easy to just stop. Stop fighting. Stop hurting. Stop witnessing the systematic destruction of everything I'd spent a lifetime building. With the pills in my hand, I knocked over a stack of books on the nightstand. As I bent to pick them up, an old leather journal fell open. My journal from college. I'd given it to Deborah years ago when she'd been researching our family history. A passage caught my eye. Today, I failed my advanced economics midterm. Professor Hadley called me to his office and said, "Sullivan, you have two choices. Give up or fight back. But know this. How you respond to failure will define you far more than your successes ever will." I put the pills back in the bottle. Tomorrow, I would fight back. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Martin Chen, the former head of mathematics at my school and a trusted colleague. "Patricia," he said without preamble, "I don't believe any of this nonsense. Neither do most of the veteran staff. These allegations don't match the woman we worked alongside for 2 decades." His words were the first ray of light in weeks of darkness. Martin went on to tell me he'd been asking questions, looking into Robert's claims, and something didn't add up. "Your son approached the board with these allegations 3 days after they rejected his proposal to rename the science wing after himself in exchange for a sizable donation," Martin explained. "Did you know about this?" I hadn't, but it was the first piece of a puzzle I was determined to solve. That same day, Thomas called. His voice was subdued. "I've been looking over the lawsuit documents more carefully," he said. "Some of the dates don't match my calendar. Meetings Robert claims I attended with his clients occurred when I was demonstrably elsewhere. I've found discrepancies, Patty. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you," I said. "Our son is not who we thought he was. And it's time we fought back." The kitchen table in Deborah's home became my war room. I taped a large timeline to the wall, meticulously documenting every action Robert had taken against us, every false claim, every manipulated piece of evidence. Martin proved to be an invaluable ally. Through his connections at the school, he discovered Robert had approached 3 different board members with varying versions of his allegations, carefully tailoring each story to exploit that member's particular concerns or biases. More importantly, Martin put me in touch with Alicia Montgomery, a former student of mine who now worked for a major financial institution investigating fraud. "Your son has a gambling problem, Mrs. Sullivan," Alicia told me over coffee, sliding a folder across the table. I pulled some strings with contacts in Vegas and Atlantic City. "Robert has lost over $740,000 in the past 18 months, has on a payment plan with 2 casinos, and owes money to at least 1 suspected loan shark." The folder contained credit card statements, loan applications, and casino records. Robert's perfect life. The success he'd thrown in our faces for years was a house of cards. Had been fired from his prestigious firm 6 months ago for ethical concerns, but had maintained the appearance of employment, leaving his apartment each morning in his suit and returning each evening as if from work. His divorce from Melissa, which Head claimed was amicable and mutual. Shed signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of the settlement, which explained why Wed never heard her side. "He needs money, badly," Alicia concluded. "And you and Mr. Sullivan have significant assets. Your home, retirement accounts, Thomas' business." The pieces were falling into place. Robert wasn't just seeking revenge for perceived childhood slights. He was desperately trying to get access to our money to cover his mounting debts. My next step was to reconnect with Joshua Park, another former student who'd become a cybersecurity expert. When I explained my situation, he agreed to help without hesitation. "Your son made some amateur mistakes," Joshua said after examining my accounts. "He used sophisticated methods to hack your email and create false evidence. But he got sloppy, reused passwords, didn't clear logs. Classic case of someone who knows just enough to be dangerous but not enough to cover their tracks properly. Joshua helped me recover deleted emails, showing Robert had been planning this for over a year. Had created elaborate fake email chains between me and Richard, doctored financial records from the school, and even hired actors to stage compromising photos that were later manipulated with editing software. Armed with this knowledge, I began playing a dangerous game. When Robert called to check on me, really to gather information and gloat, I played the role of the defeated, broken mother. I just don't understand why this is happening. I sobbed into the phone. Everything's falling apart, Robert. Your father is talking about divorce. I'm sorry you're going through this, Mom, he said, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from his voice. Sometimes these things reveal who people truly are. I suppose you're right, I sniffled. I just don't know how he'll manage financially if your father goes through with the divorce. The attorney's fees alone. This strategic display of vulnerability paid off. Believing I was completely broken, Robert became overconfident and careless. He began using his regular email for communications about his plans, which Joshua was now monitoring with court-approved authorization. Given the fraud being committed, the breakthrough came when Thomas, who had cautiously begun working with me again, discovered irregularities in his business banking records. Robert had been using Thomas' personal information to open credit lines in his name, then transferring funds to offshore accounts. With Thomas now fully convinced of Robert's betrayal, we implemented the next phase of our plan. Thomas reached out to Robert, suggesting a private meeting to discuss resolving family matters outside the legal system. I know your mother and I haven't always been perfect parents, Thomas said carefully in the recorded call. Legal in our state with one-party consent. If you're in some kind of trouble, son, maybe we can work something out. Robert hesitated before responding. What kind of something did you have in mind? Financial support, perhaps, in exchange for dropping these legal matters. Your mother's health is suffering, and frankly, so is my business. The hook was baited, and Robert bit. I might be open to that. I have some expenses that have come up unexpectedly. Gambling debts, Thomas asked innocently. There was a long pause before Robert replied, his voice tight. Who told you that? No one needed to tell me. I've been a financial advisor for 35 years, son. I recognize the patterns. After more negotiation, Robert agreed to meet at our home to discuss terms. Meanwhile, another unexpected ally emerged. Robert's private investigator, Derek Marshall, contacted me directly. Your son hasn't paid me in 3 months, he said bluntly. And I don't work for free, especially when I discover I've been manipulated into participating in a fraud. Derek explained that Robert had initially hired him to investigate Thomas' business practices, claiming his father was embezzling from clients. Only later did Derek realize Robert was using the information to create false evidence. I have recordings of our meetings where he specifically asked me to find or create evidence against you both. I don't operate that way, Mrs. Sullivan. With Thomas now firmly by my side, we carefully approached Sarah. After dozens of ignored calls and messages, we sent her a package containing irrefutable proof of Robert's manipulation. The original, unedited family videos alongside Robert's doctored versions, forensic analyses of the fake emails, and statements from Melissa about the true nature of their divorce. To our relief, Sarah finally agreed to meet. When she saw the evidence, systematically laid out and verified by independent experts, her defenses crumbled. She whispered, tears streaming down her face. He showed me those videos, and they confirmed feelings I'd sometimes had as a child. That I wasn't as smart or accomplished as Robert. That you had to pay special attention to me because I needed more help. He made it all seem so plausible. That's how manipulation works, I said gently, taking her hand. It starts with a grain of truth and builds a mountain of lies around it. As our family slowly began to reconnect, Robert sensed he was losing control of his narrative. Thomas had discovered evidence that Robert had been embezzling from his own investment clients before being fired, explaining the ethical concerns cited in his termination. We were preparing for a final confrontation, gathering our evidence and building our case. When Robert made his most desperate move yet, Thomas and I sat in our living room, recorders hidden but running, the house wired for video and audio with Joshua's help. Everything was in place for Robert's arrival. When he entered, I noticed immediately how different he looked. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that betrayed his outward confidence. He carried an expensive leather briefcase and wore a tailored suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. "Mom, Dad." He nodded curtly, declining our offer of coffee. "Let's get straight to business." Thomas played his part perfectly, appearing defeated and desperate. "What will it take for this all to go away, son?" "Name your price." Robert smiled, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. "I've prepared a settlement agreement. You transfer the lake house to me. Provide $1.5 million in cash for, let's call it emotional damages, and sign over controlling interest in the business to me as your successor. In return, all legal actions disappear." "That's a lot, Robert," Thomas said, appearing to struggle with his emotions. "The business alone is worth—" "I know exactly what it's worth," Robert snapped. "I also know about the Carson Holdings deal you're negotiating. That alone will bring in enough to cover what I'm asking." Thomas looked appropriately shocked that Robert had knowledge of this confidential deal. "How did you—" "I have my sources," Robert said smugly. "Just like I had sources at Mom's school. Just like I have sources now watching your every move." I dabbed at fake tears. "Why are you doing this to us? What did we ever do to deserve this?" Robert laughed, a hollow sound. "You really don't get it, do you? You two had everything. Success, respect, a perfect marriage. Meanwhile, I've been drowning for years, drowning in gambling debts." Thomas asked innocently. Robert's face hardened. "Who told you that?" "No one needed to tell us," I said. "We've pieced it together. The casinos, the loan sharks, getting fired from your job, temporary setbacks." Robert dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Everyone has financial challenges occasionally. $500,000 in gambling debts isn't a challenge." "Son, it's an addiction," Thomas said gently. For a moment, Robert's mask slipped, revealing raw panic beneath. Then his expression hardened again. "So what? You think that changes anything? I still have enough evidence to destroy you both." "Fabricated evidence," I corrected. "We know about the doctored emails, the staged photos, the manipulated videos." Robert smirked, but I noticed a slight tremor in his hand. "It doesn't matter if it's real or not. It only matters what people believe. And they believe the worst about you now. Don't they, Mom? How does it feel to be a pariah in the community you gave your life to?" Thomas sighed heavily. "If we give you what you want, what guarantee do we have that this ends here? That next year you won't come back asking for more? You'll have to trust me," Robert said with mock sincerity. "Like Melissa trusted you before you emptied your joint accounts?" I asked. "Like your clients trusted you before you misappropriated their funds?" Robert's confidence visibly wavered. "You've been talking to Melissa? That's impossible. The NDA only covers her public statements," Thomas finished. "It doesn't prevent her from speaking to family members privately." For the next hour, we carefully maneuvered Robert into admitting more and more of his scheme. Thomas pretended to consider the settlement offer, asking detailed questions that required Robert to explain exactly how he had manufactured evidence against us. "The school board was almost too easy," Robert boasted, growing more comfortable as he believed we were capitulating. 3 board members, with 3 different weaknesses. Harrison is worried about his own financial improprieties. Janet's son was denied admission to Princeton when Mom was on the admissions committee. And Goldman simply hates successful women in positions of power. "And the affair allegations?" Thomas asked, his voice carefully controlled. Robert actually laughed. "There was no affair. Richard Goldsmith is gay, for God's sake. But the power of suggestion is remarkable. People see 2 colleagues at a conference and want to believe something scandalous is happening." As Robert continued detailing his manipulations, growing more animated and less cautious, a soft noise from the hallway made him pause. Sarah stepped into the room, her face pale but determined. "Sarah." Robert stood abruptly. "What are you doing here?" "Listening to my brother admit to destroying our family with lies," she said quietly. "How could you do this, Robert? How could you manipulate me like that?" Robert's expression cycled rapidly through shock, anger, and calculation before settling on contrition. "Sarah, you don't understand. They're manipulating you now. Can't you see that? Everything I showed you was real. Stop it." She cut him off. I've seen the original videos before your edits. I've read the forensic reports on the emails. It's over, Robert. For a moment, I thought he might break down, might finally show genuine remorse. Instead, his face contorted with rage. He lunged toward me, grabbing my shoulders. You think you've won? He hissed, fingers digging painfully into my skin. This isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really were. Cold, distant, always pushing, never satisfied. Thomas pulled Robert away from me as Sarah reached for her phone to call the police. Don't bother, came a voice from the doorway. Detective Morales stepped into the room, followed by Officer Diaz, who had questioned me weeks earlier. We've heard everything we need to. As Robert was led away in handcuffs, still shouting accusations, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness. Where had we gone wrong? How had the sweet little boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets transformed into this stranger consumed by resentment and greed? But those questions would have to wait. For now, we had to begin the long process of rebuilding what Robert had so methodically torn down. The period after Robert's arrest should have been one of recovery and healing. Instead, it brought a new wave of challenges. Released on bail pending trial, Robert wasn't finished with us yet. We returned home one evening to find the house had been broken into. Nothing appeared stolen, but something felt wrong. Thomas discovered it first. His home office had been subtly rearranged, with certain files left conspicuously open on his desk. The next day, an IRS agent called. Mr. Sullivan, we've received an anonymous tip regarding potential tax fraud. I'm afraid we'll need to conduct a full audit of your personal and business finances for the past 7 years. The planted evidence was sophisticated. Falsified financial statements, backdated documents, and fabricated offshore account records that suggested Thomas had been hiding significant income. Robert had clearly spent his time on bail, setting up one final attack. As we struggled to prove the documents were forgeries, I made a decision. If Robert wanted a final showdown, I would give him one. But on my terms. I called him directly, despite this being a violation of his bail conditions. We need to talk. Robert, not as adversaries, but as mother and son. Please. He was suspicious, of course. Why would I agree to that? So you can record me again. No recordings, no lawyers, no police, I promised. Just us, at the lake house this weekend. I want to understand, Robert. Before all of this goes any further, I need to know why. After some negotiation, he agreed. What he didn't know was that I had already spoken to Sarah, who would be hiding at the lake house when we arrived. I wanted her to hear the unvarnished truth from her brother's own mouth. Thomas was against the plan. It's too dangerous, Patricia. Hes desperate now, capable of anything. That's exactly why this needs to happen, I insisted. Hess, spinning out of control. Maybe, just maybe, I can reach whatever humanity is left in him. The lake house had been in Thomas' family for generations, a rustic 3-bedroom cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee, where Wed spent countless summer weekends. Robert had learned to swim in that lake, had caught his first fish off the wooden dock, had experienced so many happy moments there. I hoped the setting might reach something in him that courtrooms and accusations couldn't. I arrived first. As planned, Sarah was already there, hidden in the back bedroom. I had arranged recording equipment, not for legal purposes this time, but so Sarah could hear everything without being seen. Robert arrived an hour later, his expensive car kicking up dust on the gravel driveway. He entered without knocking, his body language tense and defensive. So, Mom, he said, scanning the room with suspicious eyes. What's this really about? Some new trap you're setting. Sit down, Robert, I said, gesturing to the old plaid sofa, where he used to read comic books as a boy. Why, I'm finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of emotional neglect. I shook my head. That's not what happened, and deep down, you know it. We weren't perfect parents, but we loved you fiercely. Supported you consistently. What I want to understand is when that narrative changed for you. When we transformed in your mind from imperfect but loving parents into monsters who deserved destruction. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even a glimmer of the sun I remembered. but it vanished quickly. You created this situation, not me, he said coldly. You and Dad set impossible standards, then acted disappointed when I achieved them. Nothing was ever enough. Is that really how you remember your childhood? What about the standing ovation we gave you at your middle school graduation? The party for your debate championship? The scrapbooks I kept of every achievement? Performative parenting, he sneered, looking good in front of others while making sure I knew privately that I could always do better. We went back and forth like this. My genuine confusion and hurt met with his distorted recollections of events. It was as if we'd lived completely different lives. Finally, I asked the question he'd been holding back. When did the gambling start, Robert? He stiffened. That's irrelevant. Is it? Because it seems to me that your campaign against us began around the same time you started having serious financial problems. You think this is about money? He laughed bitterly. That I manufactured all of this for an inheritance. I think it started as revenge for perceived childhood slights, but became more urgent when you needed funds to cover gambling debts. I said calmly. The timing fits, doesn't it? Your first allegations against the school board came 1 week after Bellagio threatened legal action for unpaid markers. His face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. $678,000, Robert. That's the current total, isn't it? Plus another $100,000 to that loan shark in Atlantic City. Anton, I believe his name is. Who told you? He stopped himself, but his face had gone pale. It doesn't matter. You're trying to distract from the real issue, which is that you and Dad ruined my life, he shouted, finally losing his composure. You pushed and pushed until I became this perfect achievement machine with no real self underneath. Do you know what it's like to wake up at 32 and realize you've never made a single choice that wasn't influenced by trying to please your parents or prove something to them? Is that why you gamble, Robert? To make choices that are just yours? He looked away, jaw tight. The gambling is complicated. Help me understand the complications, I said gently. And somehow, whether due to the familiar surroundings or simple exhaustion from maintaining his rage, Robert began to talk, really talk, for the first time in years. It started as celebration after a big client win. Just a night in Vegas, blowing off steam. I was good at it. Won $12,000 that first night. The feeling was incredible. Not just winning, but the risk itself. For once in my life, I was doing something with no guarantees, no safety net. Something Dad would definitely disapprove of. He described how occasional recreation became regular escape, then compulsive need, how early wins gave way to devastating losses, how he began lying to Melissa, to colleagues, eventually embezzling from clients to cover his debts. When Melissa found out and left me, when the firm fired me, he admitted, staring at his hands, it couldn't be my fault. It had to be the pressure, the expectations, your expectations. So you decided to punish us, I said softly, to take everything from us the way you felt your life had been taken from you. You deserved it, he said, but the conviction in his voice had weakened. After everything you did, what exactly did we do, Robert? Be specific. Not how we made you feel, but what actions did we take that justify destroying our lives? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, struggling to articulate concrete examples. You always praised Sarah's art, made a big deal about her creativity, while my achievements were just expected. We celebrated every debate win, every academic honor. I countered. Your graduation cards and birthday presents are still in the attic, each one detailing how proud we were of you. But you never. He stopped, frustration clear on his face. You don't understand. You can't understand. Try me, Robert. Help me understand. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in decades. Robert finally articulated the core of his resentment. Not that we hadn't loved or supported him, but that had built his entire identity around achieving and pleasing us, only to discover in adulthood that external validation couldn't fill the emptiness inside him. When everything fell apart, I needed someone to blame, he finally admitted. As he spoke, I saw flickers of recognition cross his face, moments of clarity where he seemed to hear the irrationality of his own grievances. But each time, he would retreat back behind anger and justification. We had been talking for nearly 2 hours when the conversation took a darker turn. Robert began describing in explicit detail how he had manufactured evidence against us. The satisfaction Head felt watching our reputations crumble, the thrill of turning Sarah against us. It was almost too easy, he said, a disturbing smile playing at his lips. People are so willing to believe the worst. One whisper of financial impropriety, one hint of marital infidelity, and lifelong friends become strangers overnight. And that gave you pleasure? Watching us suffer. Justice, he corrected. It was justice. For what, Robert? For loving you? For being imperfect humans who did their best to raise good children? Something in him snapped. He stood suddenly, looming over me, his face contorted with rage. Stop pretending you don't know. Stop acting like the victim. You know what you did to me. No, Robert, I don't. Tell me, what exactly did we do that merits this level of destruction? You made me who I am, he shouted. This empty, hollow person who doesn't know how to exist without external validation, who panics when he's not the best. The brightest, the most successful person in the room. We didn't do that to you, Robert, I said quietly. We had expectations, yes. We encouraged excellence, yes. But the compulsion to be perfect, that came from within you. We tried to tell you to slow down, to enjoy life, to find balance. You were the one who insisted on pushing harder, achieving more. Liar. He grabbed a nearby lamp and hurled it against the wall, glass shattering across the hardwood floor. You're trying to gaslight me, just like always. He advanced toward me, fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I genuinely feared he might strike me. Robert, stop. Sarah emerged from the back bedroom, tears streaming down her face. This has gone far enough. He froze, staring at her in shock. Sarah? What are you? You've been here the whole time. I heard everything, she said, moving to stand beside me. I needed to understand, too. Robert's expression cycled through surprise, betrayal, and rage. So this was a setup after all, he snarled. Both of you conspiring against me. No one is conspiring against you, I said firmly. We're trying to help you see the truth before you destroy yourself, along with everyone else. Help me. He laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. Let me show you what help looks like. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm roughly. Sarah screamed and tried to intervene, but he pushed her aside, causing her to stumble into the coffee table. I'll make sure both of you pay for this, he hissed, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. The front door burst open. Thomas rushed in, followed by 2 police officers. Get your hands off her, Robert, Thomas commanded. Robert released me abruptly, his face transforming instantly. He raised his hands, assuming a defensive posture. She attacked me, he claimed, his voice suddenly steady. I was defending myself. Sarah saw the whole thing. But his performance fell flat this time. The officers had heard everything through the wire I was wearing, a precaution Thomas had insisted upon, despite my promise to Robert about no recordings. As they handcuffed Robert, reading him his rights, he fixed me with a look of pure hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. Not by a long shot. But we all knew it was. The evidence was overwhelming, not just of his financial crimes and fraudulent allegations, but now attempted assault, as well. His bail would be revoked. His chance at a plea deal was gone. As the officers led him away, I caught one last glimpse of his face. Beneath the anger and bravado, I saw something else. A flicker of the lost little boy who had somehow convinced himself that achievement was the only path to love. That realization broke my heart more thoroughly than any of his betrayals. The aftermath of Robert's arrest and subsequent trial unfolded in waves of painful publicity and private reckonings. He was ultimately convicted of multiple charges: fraud, embezzlement, filing false police reports, and fabricating evidence. The judge, noting both the premeditation of his crimes and his lack of remorse, sentenced him to 8 years in a medium-security facility. Rebuilding our lives proved to be a slow, painstaking process. Thomas' business gradually recovered as the truth emerged, though some clients never returned. The school board issued a public apology after their investigation concluded there had been no financial improprieties during my tenure. Former colleagues and friends reached out, many expressing shame for having doubted me. I should have known better. Janet Levinson told me over coffee, her eyes downcast. 20 years working together, and I let a few doctored documents override all that history. I'm so sorry, Patricia. We all want to believe we wouldn't be susceptible to manipulation, I replied, finding forgiveness easier than I'd expected. But Robert was exceptionally skilled at exploiting vulnerabilities and doubts. Our home, once a symbol of our family's success, now felt tainted by painful memories. After much discussion, Thomas and I decided to sell it and purchase a smaller property closer to Sarah in New York. Starting fresh seemed the healthiest path forward. Sarah struggled with guilt over her role in Robert's campaign against us. I should have seen through his lies, she said during one of our weekly therapy sessions. My own brother, and I couldn't tell he was manipulating me. He told you what part of you already feared might be true. Our therapist, Dr. Winters, pointed out. That's how effective manipulation works. It attaches to existing insecurities and amplifies them. Those family therapy sessions became crucial to our healing process. Thomas and I had to confront difficult truths about our parenting, not the abusive neglect Robert had alleged, but the subtle ways we might have contributed to his perfectionism and need for validation. I did push him, Thomas admitted during one particularly difficult session. I saw so much potential in him, and I wanted him to have every opportunity I didn't have, but I never stopped to consider whether those were opportunities he actually wanted. And I probably did give Sarah more explicit affirmation. I acknowledged. Robert seemed so self-assured, so capable, that I sometimes forgot he needed emotional reassurance as much as academic encouragement. 6 months after the trial, Robert's counselor at the correctional facility contacted us. Hez requested a meeting, she explained. I want to be clear that you're under no obligation to agree, and I completely understand if you choose not to. Thomas was adamantly opposed. After everything is done? Absolutely not. But something in me needed closure. Needed to see my son one more time, to understand if there was any possibility of redemption, however distant. The visiting room was stark and institutional, nothing like the warm family spaces where we had built our lives together. Robert sat at a metal table, dressed in a beige prison uniform that hung loosely on his frame. He looked older than his 33 years, his posture rigid with tension. Mom. He nodded as I sat across from him. Thanks for coming. Why did you want to see me, Robert? He looked down at his hands, clasped tightly on the table. The gambling program here. Part of it is making amends. Not just apologies, but trying to understand the harm we've caused. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. I'm not ready to apologize. I still have a lot of anger. But I'm starting to see that some of what I believed wasn't accurate. It wasn't much. But it was more self-awareness than had shown in years. We talked for almost an hour, navigating around the raw wounds that still existed between us. Robert couldn't yet take full responsibility for his actions, still clinging to the narrative that his behavior had been a justified response to childhood grievances. But there were moments of genuine reflection, brief glimpses of the son I remembered. The therapist here asked me to identify my earliest memory of feeling like I wasn't good enough, he said toward the end of our visit. I told her about winning second place in the 4th grade science fair. I was devastated because I'd always gotten first place before. I told her how you and Dad must have been so disappointed in me. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. She asked me to describe exactly what you said and did when I came home with that red ribbon, and I realized. I couldn't remember. I had this whole story about your disappointment, but when I tried to recall specific words or actions, there was nothing there. Just my own feelings of failure. That small realization seemed to have cracked something open in him. The possibility that some of his grievances existed more in his perception than in reality. As I prepared to leave, he asked hesitantly, "Will you come again?" "I don't know, Robert," I answered honestly. "This is difficult for all of us, but I'll think about it." In the months that followed, I did visit again, not regularly, but occasionally. Thomas eventually agreed to join me once, though the meeting was strained and brief. Sarah has not yet felt ready to see her brother, a boundary we all respect. The healing within our family continues to unfold in fits and starts. There are good days when we can laugh together, share memories, and feel the warmth of our connection. There are difficult days when the pain of betrayal resurfaces, when trust feels fragile and uncertain. During a family dinner celebrating Thomas' birthday, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. To rebuilding, she said simply. To finding our way back to each other? Later that evening, as Thomas and I sat on our new porch watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness, he took my hand. Do you think we'll ever understand why Robert did what he did? Really understand. I considered the question carefully. I think we're beginning to. The gambling addiction, the financial pressure, the childhood insecurities that festered into adult resentments. Those are all pieces of the puzzle. But people are complicated, Thomas. There may never be a single, satisfying explanation. Could we have prevented it? He asked, the question that had haunted us both. Maybe, maybe not. We did our best with the knowledge and resources we had at the time. That's all any parent can do. The truth is, family relationships are both our greatest strength and our greatest vulnerability. The people closest to us have unparalleled power to hurt us precisely because we love them so deeply, trust them so completely. Robert exploited that vulnerability in ways that nearly destroyed us all. Yet here we were, still standing, still connected to each other, not unchanged. We carried scars from his betrayal that would never fully fade, but not broken either. There is a resilience in family bonds that can withstand even the most devastating breaches of trust. I don't know what the future holds for Robert or for our relationship with him. Genuine reconciliation would require a level of accountability and change that may be beyond his capacity, at least for now. But I've learned never to say never. People can surprise you, with both their capacity for cruelty and their potential for redemption. What has your experience been with family betrayal? Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you loved after a devastating breach? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these painful journeys can be incredibly healing. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing it with others who might need to hear that recovery is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. Hit that like button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings some comfort to those navigating their own family conflicts. Remember that even in our darkest moments, healing remains possible if we're brave enough to pursue it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.